Hello and welcome back to Holts. It's been a little hiatus. The spring sale didn't happen because of COVID. However, that means this sale is mega. So just squat down and we'll go back to over and unders in a second. Here is something that is actually very interesting. This is a John Dixon round action. And we did a film with this very gun, with one of these. We learned that actually they are a very, very special machine. I think you agree, they look very special, built on a trigger plate over anything else. This one is perhaps less than delicious. It's cracked at the hand, which is not ideal. It's fairly short in the stock, but beyond anything, it's actually sleeved, which turns what is usually a fairly nimble gun to a bit of a slower one. Not that there's anything bad about that. Look at the cocking indicators. I don't recall seeing on the other one. Very interesting. It's one of those things that perhaps it's not the purest version. It's sort of the same as buying, if you want a classic car that somebody's yobbed up a bit. It makes it very accessible, but perhaps you wouldn't get the full feel scenario, but it's still beautiful to look at. I think that's still beautiful to look at anyway. Pair of Abiatico and Salvanelli Excaliburs. Abiaticos, I've always held a special place in my heart. I remember the first one I ever saw and I thought, how can something be made that is that affordable and still that beautiful? These guys, engraving wise, really, I wouldn't say they lead the way, but they do still come out with some amazingly creative designs. And there's deep carved acanthus. It's a good example of that. It's very nice, very nice. I suppose I've learned a little bit more about guns. There's a few things about them that perhaps turn me off a little bit more than when I first saw them, but that doesn't really matter, does it? I think it's always important, regardless of how deep you get into any subject, is always to remember what brought you the joy when you first started and try and harness some of that emotion when you see them again, and it really does work. Like, they are beautiful. 1660, look, 1660, just brilliant, fun little guns. Brilliant guns, very classy. And you could have two of them. Look at that grip cap, that's a lovely touch, isn't it? Lovely. These Abiaticos are actually a 2007 pair, lot 1659, lot 1660. They're only like 4 to 6 grand. 4 to 6 grand. You know what, these would have been new. And bear in mind that there is obviously sales commission on top of that of 25% plus VAT, but it doesn't matter because, you know, you're going to get a new pair of those made up. You're in very nice car money. Ooh, hello. Browning Custom? Yeah, Browning Custom. You always say it's a little bit custom because the side plates that they inlay are always made of a slightly different steel to that of the original action. There's a slight colour that you can, to be fair, clean off just about, but you can only ever so slightly see it. Also, the way the metal cuts is ever so slightly different. Not that there's really of any consequence whatsoever. Well, that's a fake 3-piece forend. So what I find quite interesting is, a lot of the time, because a 3-piece forend is a very expensive thing to have on a gun, they'll checker it, they'll put the pins in, dummy pins, and they'll draw a little fake scribe line along the side, and yet the forend still only moves back and forth slightly. So there's something quite funny about the way that forend handles, but it's by the by. Step up rib. Mechanically, the gun feels very sound. Other than that, single trigger by P. Jacoby engraving. And the engraving is extremely nice. And that is an absolutely beautiful custom job. That's 1653, this one. If you're after a beautiful 20 bore, fit the bill very well. Look at the way these fences fold out into their different carved lines. And they do, all the lines of this gun flow very, very well around, like it's a well thought through thing. All too often you can see guns, and I understand it's so tempting to try and fit so much in, but how do you have a gun that flows together design-wise and is unbelievably aesthetically appealing in its carving and its engraving? It's a task, right? And it's fairly adult-sized straight and stock. extremely adult sized actually. Good 15 and a bit. A step up ribbit spanking like that is actually would make a really lovely little walked up gun maybe. But yeah, I mean it'd be just a good little game gun. It doesn't move so erratically that you couldn't shoot some half decent birds with it as well. That is beautiful. Perhaps not real or conventional, but that is stunning. That's 4 to 6 grand. That's the same price as a pair of Abiatico and Salvanellis. It's probably the purer of the options, and it's, to be honest, it's in slightly better order. It is absolutely stunning. Like, it's a true custom gun. Really well put together. It's certainly got a little bit more class and a few more beautiful touches than these little Abiatico round bodies, but I'd be torn if I had that money to just throw at either of those as to which one I'd pick actually. The pair is beautiful. I always love these little Abiatico. Very tiny push button releases. That's very nice. Before we go through and have a look at a few more over and unders, this is a Stephen Grant side lever, but this one is a hammer gun. It's actually every bit as beautiful as you'd imagine. Damascus barrels, all silver finish. There's a little bit of hardening retention in there, but fully reproofed very recently. Non-ejector, obviously. It is a very interesting looking gun. And those hammers actually are a very interesting design. Like, they're very staunch, very upright, very strong, powerful for a gun that, in a hammerless edition, is extremely sleek. I like it. Like, it's a very beautiful thing. As I'm sure many people will like it. This one apparently has had a huge amount of attention because it's a sort of best of both worlds. If you want to be cute and have a hammer gun, and you want to be cute and have a side lever, this is one of the very few options you'll find out there. That's 1801. That is beautiful. Oh, it just moves like silk as well. That is a stunning, stunning machine. It really is. Silver Pigeon 528 bore. So I know in a room filled with some of the best guns in the entire world, we probably shouldn't spend too much time on this kind of everyday gun, but we're going to, and we'll get it out of the way early. We'll talk about all of the everyday guns that are here quickly. Beretta Silver Pigeon 5 in a 28 bore, 28 inch. That's a nice thing. You know, it would have taken someone with some stones to buy that in the first instance, and then for it to retain its colour and someone not to accidentally wash it off or knock it off. That's a beautiful little gun for very little money in my head. Perennia. Perennia is a real interesting gun from Beretta, as I'm sure you all know. And this little lot 1667 is no exception. There's a lot of tech here that we can now find in the 692, 694, all the 690 series. And it was a bit of a test bed for those. There's some bits about them that perhaps weren't quite so good, but there's a lot in them that is just slightly different. And if you want a Beretta but don't entirely love the Silver Pigeon idea, these are very cool. Very cool. And they've aged well, to be fair. They have aged well. They were well put together. Garabi. Kaiser Garabi. 1665. There's a couple of them here actually, by the look of it. Probably one of the best looking guns for the money out there. It's an Essex, I guess. Yeah, this is an Essex. I should probably know that much better. Yeah, it is an Essex. The Essex they stopped, which we kind of found heartbreaking. It was one of my favourite models they did with the fine rose and scroll. It felt very classy, but apparently they didn't sell many because their louder versions were more popular, which says something about society maybe, or something about me, probably more importantly. It's a really good looking gun, I think anyway, and probably eminently affordable. Like, if you're after a modern sporting gun that you can go and shoot that handles like a modern sporting gun, but looks a little bit English in its engraving, if nothing else, Guarini Essex. 725 Sporter Grade 5. I mean, there's nothing that special about them, but they are pretty. And if you're after a pretty Browning, there is not that many options. That's a lie, there's loads of options out there. And this, a rotary underlever, says, it's all tied in, so we're going to open it. Single 4 by R.R. Rod. It's actually a really beautiful thing. I presume it's been rehardened. It's a little bit too nice to not be. But some big guns feel significantly better than others.
Oh, he's not. Okay.
This is a very nice, very handleable, large rod. We can all agree that swords are pretty smart. We've got an array of sabres and dress swords and bits, but I think this is probably one of the coolest things I've seen here as a child. This is a glove sword. Unfortunately, my hands are far too manly to fit in it. However, young Charlie has the perfect size hands to demonstrate how cool this is.
You're making me angry now, and that's just...
I'm standing inside of 2 yards, mate. Like, there's no way you can get to me. That's the problem, is it's not flexible. You are just, it's a terrible weapon for someone on foot.
It's kind of like the medieval Iron Man, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, like if Iron Man didn't think that having an articulated wrist was a good idea.
You want too much.
Clearly, my millennial needs. Like, that is as cool as it comes. This is the sort of thing out of a video game. How awesome is that? Exquisite little Holland and Holland. Very strange little one. It's had a bit of a hard life. It's very well worn, but that engraving pattern is very different to anything I've seen before. The whole gun seems a little sleeker than your average Holland. Yeah, and that very empty action face is in itself very, very beautiful. Rizzini Artemis. Again, another very pretty side plate modern shotgun. Double ELL. There's 2 or 3 double ELLs here actually. In fact, the wood on that one is exceptional for a double E. Very different, very nice. Pigeon, 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 ultralight, pigeon, another ultralight. There's enough Berettas to think about shipping a double ELL small bore, 28. 20. That's a good looking gun actually. It's from an era that the engraving was very, very different to how it is now. I think that is one of my favourite patterns they did, and on the 20 bore it just looks extra exceptional. Very nice. Very nice. A little bit of a clean up and that would go a long way. What a beautiful machine that is. It still annoys me a little bit about Berettas that even on these high grade guns they put the hideous selector. The problem is once you see it, it was pointed out to me a little while ago, once you see how ugly the safety and selector is on a Beretta versus their standard fixed non-selectable, you can't unsee it. You can't unsee it. It's the only thing about Beretta that just remains a bit uncouth. Just picked up this one. This one's just a few down the rack from that little custom 20 bore. It's a custom 12. This 20 bore's got a conventional serial, and this 12 bore, which is a custom as well, I believe. Fine scroll over its whole body. Engraved by E. Voss, lot 1625. This is a beautiful, beautiful thing actually. And again, you have that same carved banding around the top. It's a very nice touch. It's ever so slightly different to the other. Carving wise, it's a little bit less aggressive. Yeah, the serial number BSP 0001. Browning Special Project? I have no idea. Don't know. But it is special. That is, you guys know I love my little mysteries. It's the thing you want to buy just so you can solve the mystery. And then let it sit in the cabinet forevermore. Although to be fair, with that skinny game rib, it's actually got an ever so slight taper, like a 4-3 or a 5-3 mil taper. That is a really nice gun. Well, that would move so well for just casual pheasant shooting and just having some fun with a beautiful gun. Stock dimensions are interesting. A lot of drop in the heel. That's actually a very nice stock spec. It's a very nice stock spec, but still plenty of height in the front end. I realised I glazed over these probably a little bit too quickly. Should probably spend a second looking through. That Jenson, that must be a re-entry. That was in a few sales ago maybe, or to be fair, like all these things, they made quite a few guns. Well, everyone's made quite a few guns, so you see a few that are similar. I mean, these things are absolute bargains. A Webley and Scots Jenson. It is Turkish built, and it's from a period where nobody would have spent this sort of money on Turkish guns. Like today, you could probably get away with it. But it is. It's a very finely executed, extremely simple side lock over and under. There's a lot about it that perhaps is less fine, but I always had a hankering to get one of these because they're not worth big money. They're really not. This is what, lot 16, 19. We can have a little look. I bet it'll be around the £1,000 mark. Let's have a look. So a friend of mine has a pair of them, and he hammers all hell through them, and they are a great and reliable thing, and about the cheapest over and under side lock you can get. The engraving gives the game away a bit that it's one-dimensional, but I always thought if you got one, stick it in a laser engraver, burn straight over the top and add some flavour to it, put something radical on there, you should have a lot of fun. You're not devaluing a good gun by putting, I don't know, Battlestar Galactica on the side or something. Completely ridiculous. I don't know if you're ready for this, okay? If you close your eyes, and if I said, I've got a side lock over and under, 450 to 650, with grade 5 wood, with palm swell, single trigger, hand checkered to a fairly average standard, but the whole thing is well carved. The fore end's a bit smooth in the way that it looks, but 30-inch multi-choke for 450 to 650. What a gun. And they shoot really well, by the way. They do shoot very, very well. They will have some reliability issues long term, but it's so far under £1,000, even with commission. What a gun. And I know that I shouldn't be that excited by a Turkish gun when you got a John Rigby by Abiatico here. I mean, to be fair, I can't even compare it. I apologise for even thinking that there was a comparison to be made. There's not. Very fine looking thing. Beautifully put together. Very nice. Just get off my slightly excited about a completely average but very good value. It's value. Represents amazing value. Someone's got the gilt cream out. This is a more budget end Belgian Browning, PM 1980. Again, I doubt this is of any particular value. The gilt cream doesn't add anything in my opinion, but at least it's adds a personal touch, and most people are too scared to add personal touches to their guns. So, I mean, you've got to admire the gilt cream. I've got a few friends who do it to their own guns, and it's a personal touch to have some gold on the side. I know it's not a gun, right? You have to appreciate that skill level to produce that. And even the design level to come up with putting the head up the spine of the stick and actually making that look good. And it does look really good. Feel quite at home with that. Lovely. This is a John Manton. These are particularly cool because this will probably, to the date, is one of the first percussion pistols ever made. All right, that's probably a huge sweeping statement, and we're not really supposed to make those, but it's nice to add some fake romance to a gun. Definitely. The concept that this date-wise actually times up so nearly with the invention of percussion, and it's a percussion. The chances are that someone walked into the shop and says, I have just read this in the Shooting Times. If the Shooting Times was around in 1820 something. But if it was, there'd be this equivalent of, I saw this YouTube video of this gun and I want you to build the gun with this technology. That's the equivalent of it today, and how beautiful it is too. I mean, you don't see bad Manton guns because they are the best of the best, generally speaking. Little lock safeties, the beautifully engraved. That is how guns should be signed. That is so beautiful. This is how guns should be bought and engraved. This is just beautiful. Oh yes, and because you can, single set trigger, so you push that forward, for those who don't know, and that reduces the trigger pull by 80–90%. There's a few beautiful bits here, some really beautiful bits, up to including the hip flask of doom, which is quite interesting. That's probably seized up. You would have kept your flints in there, which is the thing as well, is that this could well have been a flintlock, in that this is still a flintlock pot. Open up your hole, out rolls your man stoppers to shoot the man that insulted your wife, assuming that these are dueling pistols, and then crank a bit of powder in there. It is just a really beautiful piece of kit. Oh, these are stunning as well. These go back a few years earlier, so these are flintlock. They are dated to 1742, and these are just, again, absolutely stunning. The best of the best quality of work. You have complete silver work everywhere there probably shouldn't be. Gold inlay, and look at that Damascus. It's just exceptional. And to think this thing is 300 years old. Look at that silver inlay up the side. That has worn the test of time slightly less well. Something of this quality, they really would only go to the highest people in society. So who knows who would have owned it? The chances are some pretty big names have had these sat in a box, probably similar to this at some point, or who knows? That's just a beautiful piece of history, and it is truly spectacular gun making as well. Speaking of which, that's a little bit of a scene, on a slightly different note even, that is a little bit of a scene. The little stock to the barrel to the... Yeah, it's nothing special, but it is cool. As is this, look at that. A very heavily engraved Colt. Here's a cool one. Charles Lancaster of London, the 1220. The whole concept being a gun that handles and feels a little bit like a 20 bore, but still fires 12 bore cartridges. Ejector, single trigger. Number one of a pair, but this is the only one in the sale. I tell you, it moves and handles actually very, very nicely. It is a restock, and the restock has then been extended with another piece of wood, and it has probably the most peculiar drop points in the world. But it is an interesting gun. It's in at about £4 grand, and if you're after a lightweight 12, a fast moving 12, it's a very interesting prospect. A very interesting prospect. I like the assisted opening, like, it's an interesting one, definitely. 2.5 inch chambers, 12 bore choke in both barrels. Very interesting. Very, very interesting. But not actually half as interesting as this little bad boy behind it. Although probably more appealing to many. In fact, either side of it, both of these action designs are pretty out there. Look at that. We've got 1462 and 1459. 1459 is an Army and Navy. And look, to be honest, I actually really like that. Let me put this one between my legs. I love the way that that is scalloped back in with the wood. Like, that is a beautiful looking piece of gun right there. I'm not saying it's conventional. I'm not saying it's going to win any beauty awards, but it is classy in its own way. Definitely. Very coarse checkering. It's clearly designed for using. We'll put that together in a sec. Let's have a look at this first. Baker, Fred Baker. Firstly, the engraving encompasses the whole thing of tight scrolls. This is a wild looking gun. Right, this is fascinating, this little Baker. So it's a Needham patent sidelock ejector from 1887. Estimated at 800 to 1200 quid. This is a much more exciting prospect for something unusual to put into a collection. This is both beautiful in its own way, unconventionally beautiful, extremely interesting to look at. Tactile is a good word. Been mildly restored, but not really restored. Just cleaned up is probably the better word for it. Nitro reproved 30-inch barrels. Whitworth fluid pressed steel. I mean, it's tight enough, certainly. It's very, very little choke, just to have a feel of it, unless it's been reamed out usually. Moves well, looks, I love that. I mean, for around £1,000 mark, that's not bad. It does worry me that there's no pin poking out there, but that can be worried about at a later date. So, left-hand mainspring is currently in a bag in there, saying it needs attention in the description, but look at the way this comes apart. It just would bring you joy every time you took it apart to fondle it, really. The way it comes together as well is just beautifully tactile. It's just a beautiful thing to take apart. In a world where lots of things are very similar, this would bring you plenty of joy. Ah, it's lovely. Always come out of this place with a face hurting from smiling so much. What a awesome toy. Right, and this other one, interestingly, is about the same price, 800 to 1200. Nitro reproved, early nitro reproved Damascus barrels. Probably a little bit more conventional. That Damascus is actually very beautiful. Very beautiful quality. Not original brown, there's been a few pits and marks that have been browned over. If you look closely, it's not the most ideal gun, but that's why it's 800 to 1200 quid. It's a Baker pattern side lock. It's a very practical side lock with a, and that in mind, there is definitely room for that. So the other day, like to have a bit more of a coarse checkering pattern. For 800, 1200 pounds, you could have a unbelievably good looking classy workhorse of a gun that you could use in less than clement weather. I mean, the gun was built to do that. I mean, it's not particularly special, but it is quite fine. A beautiful little semi-pistol grip Purdy sidelock. I presume it's recolour hardened or something that's very, very dark, but that is beautiful. It's a really beautiful slim little machine. Very nice indeed. Churchill here, these are proper Churchill 25 as well, with that original Churchill rib, the flat skinny rib, the predecessor of the little game rib that we see on all guns now. A single thin sighting plane. Interesting. Here's a nice pair of 20s actually, very nice. 1372, a pair of Famas, Abiatico and Salvanelli. John McNabb's. I must admit, the scene is beautiful. Grouse on the mountainside, and underneath you have the salmon, the stag and the grouse. Very pleasant looking pair of guns. More importantly, in the 20 bore, the scale and everything on these is absolutely bang on. You've got to love a detachable trigger, A, that comes out that easily, and B, that is that beautifully engineered. So 4,000 to 6,000 these are up at, which is not mega. What a beautiful thing. Unfortunately, they are, or have been, shortened to a more delicate proportion than many people over about 5'6" will appreciate. Alright, so this is probably my favourite gun I've picked up so far. It's going to take some serious beating. This is a David McKay Brown 20 bore round action over and under. How would you describe this gun other than pretty perfect in every way? Even the checkering, Simon just said it's an over and under version of a Dixon round action. The checkering is the same, the trigger plate's the same, hence you get the same trigger pulls, that same mid-weight but complete stability feel in this, strangely, where it's an over and under, you get a lot more stability, how it feels to me at least. The way the safety catch operates, the engraving, the carving on the top lever, the fact that the top lever is completely asymmetrical in its engraving, which is right because you only push it one way. The metal to metal, wood to metal, bluing, colour hardening, engraving is just second to none. The radius of the fore end, the way that fore end clips up into its little metal home there, and the way it moves as well is just, it's sex. That's the only way I can describe it. This is number one of a pair, only one here that unfortunately, so it's not a pair. I think around 25 to 35 grand. 1655 is the lot number. It's a fair amount of money. But again, everything is relative, isn't it? If you want to go and buy a new one, firstly, I am led to believe that David has retired, is retiring, is no longer making any more of these, which is a crying shame. And if he was, in this spec, you're probably at 65 grand. So, I would say it's a bargain. And it's just, you can always tell the good stuff. And it's kind of hard to say because, well, funny, there is so much good stuff in here. You really have good, better, best, and then you have something above that best quality like this that just has an indescribable essence of perfection and joy built into it. Yeah, it's romantic stupidity. But that's why you don't just buy a silver pigeon, right? William Ford, 888. Have a look at the sides. You've got some very nicely engraved ducks with the scroll, The quality of this thing is just obscene. And it, to be fair, has very short barrels for an 8. And the reason for this is, well, fairly simple. This gun was commissioned for shooting crocodiles. The concept being that you flick your sight up, load up with something tasty, go along a little boat, and then imagining that we're about Sash's height, right, sat in the water a little bit, okay. Your barrels aren't going to skim the water when you go, there's one, boom, and drop it. What an awesome machine. Commissioned for shooting crocs. What a beast. And the best bit about it as well is actually where it's got the shorter barrels, and they are fairly, not thin-walled, but they're not built like a big horrible Magnum. There's this thing, handles like a very large 12-bore. So ironically, we saw that 12-bore earlier that handled like an 8. This is an 8 that handles like a 12. So I've been subjected to some William IV guns recently, and a maker I didn't really know a great deal about before a few months ago, apart from just knowing of their existence. And I'll tell you what, some of the guns that came out of there really were brilliant. He clearly wasn't afraid of making new and exciting stuff. How awesome is that? So here we have something a little bit different. A take-down semi-automatic Sjogren's patent. How cool are these? I mean, we've looked at them before, but there is something particularly special about that gigantic moving bolt. What a beautiful little thing. Completely unembellished by comparison, but I love the fact the mag tube has such a slim grip on it. Like, it just gives a totally different feel to what we look for nowadays in a semi-automatic, but just still equally as special. I mean, probably rules well in the realms of collector's piece at this point in his time, but if you're into your old semi-automatics or just something completely different, it's going to get you some serious questions when you take it out to the playground. That is a good choice. A 28-bore, 2.5-inch chambered, London-built Watson box lock. That is, I always struggle with small bores not to get emotionally involved regardless of the quality, because regardless of the build and quality and everything, and to be fair, this one has had a life. Bluing's worn, the wood is less than perfect but not too bad. It's a nice piece of wood. The checkering's pretty sound though, all of that said. They are beautiful, like everything about them, just because of their petiteness. And yeah, it's just another box lock, but it's a 28-bore box lock. It'll be a huge amount of fun. Like, as much as I'll say, that is an absolute stunner. So this is lot 1550, 1500 to 2000. It would make the perfect gun. So is that an ejector as well? Yeah, it is an ejector. It's in need of a little bit of love, you know. It's a little bit loose on the joint there, and it could do with a reblue and a bit, but what an amazing gun for your child to start with. I mean, you're going to find a better 28-bore side by side, proper best gun, or even for yourself as your little fun gun, 16 grams of 5, something like that. You know, the future on these things, up until relatively recently, was a little dubious with the whole steel looming in a 28-bore, but there is a few options out there now that really have shone a huge light on the future of small bores. That is cool. I mean, they've never been particularly cheap to feed anyway, but yeah, it's now looking like you're not going to have to spend huge amounts on 28-bore bismuth, which is really brings these things back into the fore. That, if it was a 12-bore, would be of zero interest. It's just another box lock, but as a 28, that is such fun. And I feel actually at that sort of 15 to 2 mark is exactly where you want it to be. Buy, invest a little bit of money in the aesthetic side because we're all tarty, and then go and put it back into this condition by using it so frequently you don't stop smiling. And to be fair, I think that's the point of a lot of guns in this room, is just use them. That seems to be what the Holts attitude is everything here is a usable item. Maybe not so much in the antiques room. It's way too easy in here to skip over the pretty much endless supply of best London guns, Bosses, Purdys and Hollands. So occasionally I have to check myself and stop and dedicate a bit of time to one, and this really couldn't be a better example. It's pretty special. Just the engraving on it is absolutely spot on. It's very beautiful and a little bit different. But look at those carved fences. This embodies such a beautiful gun. Such a beautiful gun. And one of the more interesting things about it is that this gun is a bit of a live pigeon gun. You've got the flat filed rib on there. 38 New Bond Street, London. It comes with the splinter forend with the Imperial Extra Lux gold inlay and your Magnum forend. It has its own full push button release, so this actually is a fairly, this is a relatively quick and easy thing to change from slimline but slightly heavier weight game gun into full Magnum live pigeon setup, which is nice that you can change that dressing up and down. 2 3/4 inch chambers, 7.29 bore, model deluxe grenade engraved on the bottom rib. I think engraving the bottom rib of anything is just a real classy move. The other thing, and this is another double cool moment, that it has the spare trigger unit. So you've got the single trigger unit fitted in the, double trigger unit fitted in the gun, and a single trigger unit that you could bolt in if you felt the need to do so. Very pleasant. It says, I'm always fascinated by these sort of single trigger units. Everything now we take for granted how simple they are, and the perfect time that it takes in some of these single triggers from the big London makers when they first came up with them, and even to this day it requires next level gun making to get these sort of things to work properly and reliably. And to be fair, they do, but it's also just a lot easier to use 2 triggers and not slower. Cogswell and Harrison might not necessarily be the most sleek of looks, but it's very stylish in its own way. Very pleasant. I know we've done multiple videos on these, but they never cease to amaze that someone thought that this was a good, convenient or pleasant idea, and yet that negativity aside, they still work so fascinating. They're so fascinating to my brain and many others, and that you could just even contemplate that was a good idea to continue with the idea. And they are superbly light and very different, and all round just extremely French. But that is a beautiful thing. There's a beautiful darn as they go. This is an exceptionally big fat gun. This is an Allen Myers double 4-bore. This thing weighs 24 pounds, has 4 1/4 inch chambers and just under 36 inch barrels. It's huge. It is absolutely huge. I mean, to be blunt, this is a workhorse gun. I think it's lot 1585. It's estimate 6,500 to 7,500. It's for what it is. I'm gonna have to sit down. I'm gonna plus it down. There you go. Whew. It's just uncomfortably heavy. It's a workhorse gun. Like, this is not designed to be beautiful. This is designed to go out into the salt and the muck and shoot. And to be fair, for all that purpose, it's going to do the job. But it was not designed, unlike some of the other larger caliber or larger guns out there, to be particularly beautiful. That said, if there was ever a task trying to make a 4-bore beautiful and handle well in a double, it's a pretty mammoth task. Very much on the workhorse end of the spectrum, but a huge and usable, circa about 1980, 4-bore. Wow. This is a little bit more like it. J. Manton. This is definitely more like it. J. Manton 88. This is valued at actually significantly less. About 3,500, which is not a killer amount of money for a big bore London built gun. And this gun, with its longer barrels, and I understand it's a different sort of machine, an 8 is not a 4. Everything about this gun feels like you could actually shoot stuff with it. You'd need to be pretty lucky. There's no swinging going on there. That is for, in my head, bank gunning or incoming very committed big packs of geese or something. I don't really know. It's because it's cool and big. With this gun, you can actually take out and, you know, shoulder permitting, have a lot of fun with. The twist steel is of nice quality, the wood is plain, but again, this falls very much into the workhorse category. These guns weren't designed to be unbelievably fine, they were designed to go out and look at that. A left hand or left side lever, which is, to be fair, the side that a side lever should be for a right-hander. The other side is a lot more convenient for a loader, so I really like that. That's particularly special. It's not pretty. It's not ugly, to be fair. It's, in fact, it's extremely beautiful. I take everything back when I said it was ugly. It is not the finest looking gun, but it is beautiful. And more importantly, probably a little bit usable, if you could be bothered to load up the correct ammunition for it. And even look at that, ready? The fore-end release is just delightful, different, nice. It's got a little 10 or an 8 next to it. FT Baker. Got the flat file on the top there, or just the flat finish on the top there. That's pretty pretty special actually. A few Fred Baker guns in this sale. There's a 12 bore. Oh, that's fascinating. That is just a massive 12 bore for 3-inch brass cartridges. There you go, that's why. It's for very, very, very big 12 bores. 3-inch brass cartridges. That's very different. That is very different. Another workhorse gun. I say most of the big boys you'll find are put into that workhorse category. E.M. Riley & Co. London. That's very pretty as well. That's very pretty. Top lever's a little bit over centre. I mean, these are at least sort of tight. That safety catch is fascinating in shape and requires a lot more movement than a standard. But that is a good looking gun in itself. Yeah, and this is a 10 bore. That's an Adelia pack. And it's amazing how all these lined up. You can really see a quality difference. These little lugs here fit into the holes in the fore end. And it's probably one of the more refined looking larger calibers. There's a 10 out there. It's good looking. Look at the way the fences are rounded back into the barrel as well. Interesting design choice. It's just bulbous. Is it bulbous? Bulbous? It's bulbous. Much like this Baker with a tapered rib, 1 inch to ½ inch taper, 25 to 10 mil taper, probably. Actually, it looks fascinating. Where it's not filed, it's quite reflective. You can see just in the fluorescent light here, anyway, the bead reflecting back at you. It's going to make it's just a very interesting sight. It's a very interesting concept with the tiny, tiny locking bar to hold it closed. But then this is probably gets the prize for the largest, fattest 12 bore, pseudo 10 bore, 8 bore in the world. She's interesting. 1581. I don't want to pretend that this is hard, but it is unbelievably hard just to pick the ones that we do. This is quite special, certainly unique. CJ Tanner from Wyndham. So it just deserves everybody's respect, purely based on the guy who came up with this engraving design and pattern, because it's very pretty and it's different and it's a little unique. This was a way to look at it. Those huge acanthus-esque leaves it's a very stylistic choice. You got a partridge going over a barbed wire fence on some very old rotted posts. There's a very Norfolk scene in the background. It's flat with a tree half a mile away. A woodcock jumping over an old wooden gate. Again, that's just very well thought through and executed. And this gun's done some shooting by the look of it. Like it's no longer mint. And a mallard coming into land. It's good looking. There's nothing about this gun that was not good looking. At this point in its life, it's a little loose on the face, and the stock's been chopped about a bit, but it's been extended out and finished relatively well. And it comes up and moves and feels very pleasant. I like it. And it's only £1,000. The pins are a little large. That's again another stylistic choice there. But it's nice. Like everything about this gun is A little different, a little pleasant, up to including that really fat bead on the trigger guard there, with the continuation of that very strong stylistic choice. Speaking of strong stylistic choices, here's one that I am less emotionally excited by. This is a Sour AYA. It's a very strong engraving choice. And I can see the appeal of it, but it's just a little too strong, maybe. Although it is a very, very good quality, so I'm not going to knock it or anything. This is what 1403. It's not going to be a particularly expensive gun. And if you like that, well, that's really good for you. I don't knock anything that other people like. That's the way the world works. And it is beautiful. Like, it's, again, well executed. It's all well put together. There's just a little bit too... It's not quite refined enough, perhaps. It's a bit strong. It's got too much juice in the squash. Another Fred T. Baker. Side lever ejector. It's a very fat grip as well. That's interesting. Side lever time. Spent far too long looking at side levers. A Fred T. Baker. This is a bit of an interesting one, actually. And again, auction-wise, it's one of those things that is nicer, perhaps, to see in person, to sort of see it. It'd be far too easy to get excited by because it looks stunning. However, as soon as you pick it up and feel it, there's something about it that doesn't feel particularly right, and that is that the grip is just a little bit too fat. And that's a little bit of a giveaway that it is a restock, as much as, to be fair, at Holts. In the condition report, they'll tell you that it's a restock, which is quite nice. There's no fluting at the nose here, it's too deep. The checkering is very good, but for a restock, it's actually cracked. It's a very interesting piece of wood, actually. It is a very interesting piece of wood. Not one I'd pick, personally, but an interesting piece of wood. But disregard the wood. The gun's 1,000 to 1,500 quid, and it is a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing. The engraving across its face, like, it's a nice gun. It's just a shame about the stock. Whereas this, it's probably the gun most people have asked me to look at whilst here. James Dougal, 23 Gordon Street, Glasgow. This gun is 10 times more just beautiful. It really is. You know, the other one is a side lock and isn't that wonderful, and an ejector. But this is a non-ejector box lock. Side lever, double trigger. The lines through these floaty, flowy fences, ooh, triple F, running into that flat non-file rib, it's just elegance. The little leading line there, platinum and silver across the top, the very elegant safety catch, just a beautiful user's gun. And part of the joy of this, firstly, is I think the estimate is under £1,000, which is, well, it's a box lock non-ejector. Yeah, it's a side lever. It is good value for what it is. This has already been chopped about. You've had an inlet comb there. The horn plate on the back is not particularly special, but it is what it is. You wouldn't mind then actually altering it a little further to really suit your needs. And it is just an absolute pleasure to mount and hold, and the way that it opens with that side lever. And the side lever requires a fair amount more movement than the Baker there, but I don't care. Just look at the forend tip. It's been recheckered, so it's still got some grip. The engraving is stunning. Look at that bordering down the trigger guard there. I'm a big fan of this gun, a very, very big fan. I mean, even look at that. Just the way that trigger plate is carved in around the sides. Style and quality, and as Simon says regularly, you don't see a bad Scottish gun. And you don't really see bad Scottish guns, and this one is just a little bit special. Do I love it? I don't know, love's a strong word. There's a few things about it that we could be blunt and honest with. yeah, it's had bits stuck on the woodwork, it's been refinished and checkered, that's nice. That joint pin has had some abuse, most of the screws have been molested a little bit. But you're not going to get to, this gun's going to be what, 120 years old at a guess. It's probably acceptable to have a few little niggles at that age. J.D. Dougal. What a beautiful thing. I really like that. I think that embodies a piece of beautiful side lever. A little bit of flavour of something like a Dixon for a fraction of the cost. Although I feel that one's going to go over estimate quite a bit. This is a beautiful little Henry Atkin. It's got a little lettering for the original person as well. And that person is Mr. G.T. Garwood, Esquire, Hensley House, Tiverton. Dear sir, wishing you the best of good health and good shooting. Yours faithfully, P.P. Henry Atkin Limited. This is beautiful. Firstly, I think we can all, it's a very good looking gun, very classy, quite classic. And G.T. Garwood is Gough Thomas. Gough Thomas, if you don't know who Gough Thomas is, wrote the book on shotguns that I presume many, many people have read. I own 2 copies, or 2 editions. The amount of quality information that is unbelievably relevant for today about shooting, guns, shooting sports, loads, everything. It is extremely relevant. It's a really good basis of knowledge that anyone can buy and have. Oh, that's very pleasant. Ooh. Firstly, or not firstly, we've looked at this a bit now, how fine that checkering is. A flat point, that must be 32 line per inch, flat point, that is fine. The engraving is to an exceptional standard. But then if you were building a gun for Gough Thomas, right, if you were building a gun for Gough Thomas, probably had to be quite good. And it's got his spec here as well. You had the actioner of Mealy, the stocker and finisher A. Hodges, and the engraver was H. Kell. Chambers 2.5 inch, barrel length 27 inches, weight £6 3 ounces, maximum load 1 1/8 ounce of shot. This is particularly sweet. I said the man knew a lot about guns and how they moved. It's no different to any proper professional who dedicated their life to writing about sports and shooting, setting up a fairly lightweight gun. And at this point, yeah, how awesome is that? That's a proper piece of history. Some serious provenance. This little piece of history, it's lot 1450, is set at 7 to 9,000. So that provenance does come with a little bit of cost, but to be honest, even without this, this gun is beautifully, beautifully spec'd. It's so well put together. I mean, it's a London gun. That's pretty cool for starters, right? 88 Jermyn Street, London. Very nicely put together. That is cool. Put my hands where his one went. I mean, that's the whole point of these guns, I suppose, isn't it? Is to take on a piece of history and look after it and keep it going for the next person. All these guns are these best quality guns, at least, will go on through my hands, will go through my son's hands. And how awesome is it that this has been, and there's a lot of guns in here with some provenance and some cool history, but this one is particularly cool. So we've got a real interesting juxtaposition here between these and these. These are a pair of W.W. Greener Limited, established 1829, but these are a relatively modern pair of guns. And they are really, really beautiful. The first thing that needs to be admired is the case. The case, the leatherwork, the oak inside, the finish, the basing, everything is just absolutely beautiful, down to the turn screws in the box. It is a full best gun premium product. Made in 1992. From a 1992 gun, it's a relatively modern choice of wood. But the actual actioning and the quality of finish on this little single trigger gun is beautiful. The thing I remark most on is that it's probably one of the most delicate safety catches in the room, of how very, very subtle that is. It is beautiful. Movement is minimal and it's almost perfect. The very positive but extremely quiet click. I really like this. This is absolutely stunning. I have a mallard being chased by a Aggie dog on the side. Some very beautiful scroll engraving. The actual bright finish on this is so nice. And I always find it funny with dogs on engraving, you very rarely see a good dog on engraving. I don't mean in the quality of the engraving, I just mean they're usually doing something that I would consider very bad behaviour for a dog. Chasing a dog, jumping up on his back legs, trying to bite a pheasant out of the air. I don't really know the scenario. Maybe it was wounded. Maybe when the guy who commissioned these said, yeah, my dogs don't sit. Like, if I put dogs on a gun personally, they'd be sat at a peg in the back of the truck, looking good, lying by a fire, chilling out, enjoying themselves, doing the good dog stuff that dogs do. I really like these, but the case and all the accoutrements, just, there is everything you could ever want here in terms of a quality gun, a beautiful piece of wood, well-spec'd, single trigger, enough little adornments that make it very special. That's beautiful. That's 15 to 20 grand. That's 1360, which is, if you went and go get a pair made now, there's always a way to think about it, isn't it? The second-hand side-by-sides are such a bargain, especially the more modern ones. Very, very nice indeed. Whereas these, this is the only thing in this room that does not, I struggle to get my sort of heart behind. There's something about them. They're a mid-60s, 1977 pair of Purdys. Actually, Purdy over and unders have never really floated my boat massively. I say that's a complete lie. There's certain bits about them that I find absolutely gorgeous. Firstly, the way the top lever shape is, it's properly scalped. It's a very beautiful thing. And secondly, that Purdy ribless style. We just have that little island at the back with a little arrow. Nothing, leading into this little island fore end. And actually, to look down, I find it one of the most pleasant sighting planes out there. It allows you to shoot a very flat gun without stressing too much. You still have that front rib. It can be a bit of a dangerous thing in that actually they require a gun to be fitted very, very well. Because unlike a ribbed gun where you can sort of line the rib up and you can make things out, it becomes very evident when you mismount this how far out that front side is with the back side. And this gun is a bit low and got a bit too much cast for me, but this is, it is beautiful. Heel and toe plates, very slim grip. It's just a strange setup. Perfect if you need a lot of cast and you're quite squat as a human being and like shooting lightning fast partridges. They're interesting. And as I say, there is a trio of them. That's quite tasty, isn't it? So this caught my eye straight away when we came in here, actually. It is a Wesley Richards falling block sort of martini action thing. Takedown in the case. Sorry, let's put it in the correct way round. Takedown in the case. Gun clip on fore end. Horn fore end tip. Really beautifully engraved. Here comes the interesting and unfortunate part. Although, no, interesting, not unfortunate. Interesting part first. Firstly, just look at that little ramped rear sight. You can flip up, so you can shoot a billion yards. This was originally 200-250 rook, but it has been tubed. The whole centre of this bore has been removed. A cartridge sleeve fitted to 2.2 rimfire. That's pretty cool. I know I say that quite often. That is pretty cool. The fact that this gun, which to be fair would have been firing completely obsolete caliber and would have just been a wall hanger, was given a new lease of life. Remarkably pleasant. There is a really sad downside to this gun, and I do not say that lightly. And that is that the trigger has a little mechanical issue that is sometimes fires on closing. But it's got like an estimate of, it's lot 1250, an estimate of like 350 quid. It's a very reasonably priced, enjoyable 2.2 rifle. Like, for probably some, I mean, it doesn't really look like it's even been shot that much since it was tubed. I do worry, like, with any of these things that someone will have cocked it, put a new bolt in it, changed the angle of the firing pin to hit the rim slightly differently. I think they've offset the cartridge on the way in anyway. The mag looks like it slightly. Yeah, so it shouldn't be the end of the world. It's just an interesting one of somebody may, who knows what the history is. Someone started the project, didn't finish it. They did it and it's broken. It's a gamble. I suppose there is always a few things at auction that would appear to be massive bargains. When you read through that condition report, there's going to be a few things that make you go, ah, I do need perhaps to worry. And I think this is great and I consider buying it. But even I, with the ability to probably fix everything that's wrong, you don't know what has gone wrong to start with. That really is beautiful, that engraving there, the way it heads up. This is a stunning gun. It's not, the case is not what makes it, but the case is a real integral part of this whole package. Having a beautiful, slimline takedown rook rifle, but that's in a caliber that you can actually use. It's a bit of a dream, isn't it?